The flames swallowed everything. The house. The memories. The lives inside. When firefighters arrived, the walls were collapsing, the roof barely holding. And in the center of it all, a man stood outside. Barefoot. Shirtless. His face streaked with soot. His eyes vacant. A husband. A father. A pastor. A man who had spent years preaching about faith, love, and redemption. A man who stood before thousands every Sunday, lifting his hands toward heaven, speaking of God's mercy. He had baptized children, blessed marriages, comforted grieving families. And yet, when the sun rose over Austin, Texas, on October 12, 2024, this same man had lost everything. His wife. His 2 children. His home. Authorities believed it was a tragic accident, a devastating house fire that had taken an innocent family. A cruel twist of fate. A test of faith. But then, the autopsies came back. And what they revealed shattered every illusion. The truth didn't unfold gently. It crashed. It struck like a hammer against glass, shattering the perfect image he had spent years crafting. A single sheet of paper, a DNA test, had set it all in motion. A secret, buried deep beneath years of devotion and duty, had surfaced. And when it did, it wasn't forgiveness that followed. It was fire. This wasn't just a crime. It was a reckoning. And when the truth came out, no one was ready. Austin, Texas. October 12, 2024. It was 2:45 a.m. when the first call came in. A fire had erupted in an upscale neighborhood just outside the city. Flames stretched high into the night sky, devouring the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Neighbors stood on their lawns, helplessly watching as the inferno raged. Firefighters arrived within minutes, battling to push back the flames. The structure was already collapsing. A section of the roof caved in with a thunderous crash. And through the smoke and devastation, a single figure emerged, stumbling, coughing, barefoot on the wet grass. Pastor Jonathan Hayes. To his congregation, he was more than a pastor. He was a leader. A spiritual guide. A man chosen by God. Standing at 6 feet 2 inches, with piercing blue eyes and a presence that commanded attention, he had built a reputation that stretched far beyond the walls of his church. He led sermons that filled stadiums. His words reached millions through online broadcasts. He was the face of faith in Texas, a symbol of devotion, family values, and righteousness. To his followers, Pastor Jonathan Hayes was a man of unwavering principle, a devoted husband to his wife, Rebecca, and a loving father to their 2 children, Joshua and Hannah. Rebecca Hayes, 34 years old. A woman of faith, deeply committed to her family and church. She had been Jonathan's partner in ministry since they were college sweethearts. A soft-spoken yet powerful presence, she led women's groups, organized charity drives, and stood beside her husband as the embodiment of the perfect Christian wife. Joshua, 8 years old. A bright and curious boy who dreamed of becoming a pastor like his father. He loved baseball, memorizing Bible verses, and always sat in the front row of church, eyes wide, soaking in his father's every word. Hannah, 5 years old. Sweet, joyful, innocent. Her laughter was a melody that filled the halls of their home. This was the family that burned inside that house. When firefighters finally pushed through the blaze, the discovery sent chills down their spines. Rebecca's body was found in the master bedroom, her arms wrapped around Hannah in a desperate attempt to shield her from the flames. Joshua's remains were in the corner, curled into himself. The 3 of them had been found inside a locked room. But Jonathan had escaped. Why? At first, the city mourned. A pastor's family, lost in a tragic fire. His followers rallied around him, offering prayers, support, and tears. His church held vigils. The media painted him as a grieving husband and father, a man whose faith was being tested. But then, whispers began. The fire investigators noticed something that didn't add up. The locks on the doors. The positioning of the bodies. The pattern of the fire. And then came the autopsy reports. Rebecca Hayes and her children weren't just victims of the fire. They had been unconscious before the flames even reached them. Toxicology reports revealed high doses of sedatives in their systems. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was something else entirely. But what could drive a man who preached about love and faith to destroy his own family? To the world, the Hayes family was blessed. Jonathan and Rebecca were the golden couple of Austin's faith community. Their marriage, a testament to devotion. Their children, the embodiment of innocence. At church, Jonathan's sermons were filled with praise for his wife. Rebecca wasn't just Jonathan's wife, she was his foundation. She led Bible study groups. Planned charity events. Sat front row, hands folded, every Sunday morning as her husband preached. To outsiders, their love was unshakable. Their home, a sanctuary. But behind closed doors, the reality was far more complicated. Those closest to Rebecca noticed the shift. Her smile became strained. Her once social nature faded. She missed more and more gatherings. Neighbors recalled hearing muffled arguments late at night. And then, came the test. It started as something innocent. A routine DNA test. A fun curiosity about ancestry. Rebecca never expected anything unusual. But when the results arrived, her world unraveled. Joshua, her firstborn. The boy Jonathan had raised for 8 years. Jonathan wasn't his father. And the man who was. Someone Rebecca knew all too well. A trusted member of their church. A man Jonathan had prayed with. Broken bread with. A man who had been in their home. Rebecca confided in one friend. Just one. Rebecca couldn't bring herself to say the words. She hid the test results in a drawer, thinking she had time. That she could figure out how to tell him. But she never got the chance. That night, Jonathan found the report. Then, he left the house. His car didn't return until hours later. Where did he go? We may never know what went through Jonathan's mind during those hours. Did he cry? Pray? Scream? Or did he simply sit in silence, hands gripping the wheel, rage simmering beneath his skin? What we do know, is that by sunrise, his family was gone. Rebecca never got to explain. Joshua never got to say goodbye. Hannah never woke up. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. What happened in that house that night? And how did Jonathan cover it up? At first glance, the fire seemed like a tragic accident. A faulty wire. A candle left burning. But fire investigators saw something that changed everything. Gasoline. Traces of it were found near the children's bedroom door. Near the master bedroom. Near the exits. Someone had planned this. And the most chilling discovery? The bedroom doors had been locked, from the outside. Rebecca. Joshua. Hannah. They weren't just trapped. They were meant to die. Rebecca Hayes. Cause of death, smoke inhalation. Joshua Hayes. Smoke inhalation. Hannah Hayes. Smoke inhalation. They were alive when the fire started. There were no stab wounds. No gunshot injuries. No blunt force trauma. They suffocated in the smoke. Jonathan told investigators he had been at his church all night, preparing for the next day's sermon. But his own text messages painted a different story. If she betrays me, she won't live to regret it. I don't believe in divorce. I believe in justice. Then, police pulled his call logs. Jonathan's alibi was crumbling. His phone pinged at his home at 2:30 a.m. 15 minutes before the fire started. Detective. It's always the same. They think they can outsmart us. But the truth is always there, buried in the details. Jonathan stood before thousands, eyes glassy with unshed tears. Pastor Jonathan, voice breaking. My heart is shattered. My home is gone. My family, only God can heal me. The city of Austin rallied around him. Church members donated thousands to help him rebuild. TV stations covered his heartbreaking loss. But while Jonathan wept on stage, investigators were one step ahead. His phone, his own device, had betrayed him. While he preached about grief, his location history told another story. His phone had pinged at the crime scene. He thinks he's still leading a congregation. He doesn't realize we're the ones watching him now. Cliffhanger, the police were watching. And soon, the megachurch pastor's lies would crumble. The grieving widower. The broken father. The pastor. He had fooled everyone. Almost. Because in less than 24 hours, Jonathan Hayes was going to face judgment, not in a church, but in an interrogation room. For hours, he insisted he had nothing to do with it. I was at church, he repeated. I loved my family. But the detectives weren't there for a sermon. Detective. Pastor, we know you were there. Then, he made his first mistake. He told them he had driven straight to the church that night. But his phone records told the truth. Between 2:30 a.m. and 2:45 a.m., his phone never left his home. Detective. So tell me, Pastor, how were you at church when your phone was at your house, right before the fire? The moment stretched. And then, he exhaled a slow, measured breath. And said 7 words that turned the room ice cold. Pastor Jonathan, whispering. God told me to cleanse my family of sin. No remorse. No grief. Just the quiet conviction of a man who believed his actions were justified. His fate was sealed. The prosecution left nothing to chance. They laid everything bare. The premeditation, he bought gasoline the day before. The locked doors, he made sure Rebecca and the kids couldn't escape. The motive, the DNA results that shattered his illusion of control. Prosecutor. He was never a man of God. He was a man of power. And when that power slipped from his grasp, he did the unthinkable. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours. Verdict. Guilty on all counts. Sentence. Life without parole. Some defended him. Satan must have led him astray. Others left the church for good. If a man like that could stand on our pulpit, how can we ever trust again? Rebecca's family speaks out. She wanted to leave, but he controlled everything. Her finances. Her friends. Her faith. She thought he'd hurt her if she left. She was right. Jonathan Hayes may have been sentenced, but his case left behind a haunting question. How many more victims are trapped in holy households, too scared to escape? This case was shocking, but it wasn't unique. A respected pastor. A hidden darkness. A family that paid the ultimate price. Justice was served, or was it? We want to hear from you. Was his punishment too lenient, or did he get what he deserved? How do we protect victims before it's too late? And should churches be held accountable for covering up abuse? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you want more real-life crime stories that uncover the truth, hit subscribe and turn on notifications.